I said verbatim, I just returned from a flight from Hunan, and I don't feel too well. I don't feel too well.
Those words, spoken on a WestJet flight bound for Jamaica, forced the plane to turn back to Toronto. Why this man says he didn't.
I'm not saying we should have.
The 28-year-old Vaughan man is now facing a mischief charge, his actions impacting hundreds of passengers. Farah Morelli joins us live now with more on this. And Farah, you spoke with the man at the center of this today. What's he saying about why he did it?
Well, Dwight, his name is James Potok, and what he told me was that this was a prank, something that was spur of the moment. He said that he filmed it and wanted to post it on social media in hopes that it would go viral. Well, it did go viral, but not in the way he imagined.
Yeah, coronavirus is not something to joke about. It's not light. People don't take it lightly.
More than 24 hours later, that is a lesson James Potok has learned after standing up on a plane 2 hours into a flight to Jamaica and making this disturbing proclamation.
So I stood up, I said, I just returned from a flight from Hunan province. I might have said, this is the capital for coronavirus. And then I said, I don't feel too well. And I looked around, I saw the reception of the people. They didn't seem too happy about it. I don't blame them. And then I stopped recording and I sat back down in my chair.
What made you want to do that?
Well, it was really just to create a viral video.
Good one, buddy!
Well, he did go viral. This video posted on social media shows Potok being escorted off the plane, then being jeered by passengers.
Oh, they got you on camera too.
You're a clown, man. Before you planned to make this video and make this joke, were you aware of the scope of coronavirus, how much it's been talked about, and the fears that are out there? And if you were, why would you think that would be funny to make a video like this?
I guess it was a shock and awe type of thing. You know, being able to think about it after, it's definitely something that's not joked about.
Potok says he didn't realize until later in the flight that it had even been diverted.
Yeah, once I found out that they were turning the plane around is when I felt the remorse. I felt guilty. So now I'm thinking to myself, well, I think I just ruined 250 other people's travelers' plans. So that, you know, that hit me. That bothered me.
If you had a message for those people, what would that be?
I am extremely sorry. I'm completely remorseful to everybody that I damaged their plans, and to WestJet, I'm very apologetic. I'm very sorry for, you know, the situation at hand.
All right, Farah, so what happens next?
So Dwight, Potok is charged with mischief, but he's also charged with breach of recognizance. And he told me that's related to a completely different charge for which he was on a peace bond, and now he's set to appear in court in March. I did also reach out to WestJet to see whether the airline would be taking any action against him, specifically for the cost of diverting 2 flights. Keep in mind, it wasn't just this flight to Jamaica that had to be canceled. It was the return flight from Jamaica to Toronto that had to be canceled. And all WestJet would say is that they're looking at their next steps and are working with the authorities to figure out how they can hold this guy accountable.
They say actions have consequences. Thank you for that, Farah. Now imagine you're having a peaceful morning at home when a strange man carrying a gun barges in. That is exactly what happened to a Mississauga family this morning. Greg Ross has the rest of the story.
Some tense moments this morning for residents of this quiet Mississauga neighborhood.
We received a call of a male in the area of Glen Aaron Drive in Mississauga that was in the area carrying a long gun.
After wandering the neighborhood for several minutes, the man made his way towards this house. He smashed the driver's side window of a car parked in the driveway before walking up to the locked front door of the house and smashing his way through it.
My daughter said that she heard like a big bang into my door.
This woman owns the home. She wasn't there at the time, but says her kids and several of their friends were. There were 2 adults, multiple teenagers, and a 5-year-old girl inside the home when this man barged in. They did not want to appear on camera, but the 2 adults did tell me that the man demanded everybody get upstairs. He then started muttering something about a fire, and he also told them that there was another man with a gun who was chasing him.
And now I'm shaking. Oh my God.
She says she was at work when she received a frantic call from her 23-year-old son.
My son said that someone is inside my house with a long gun.
Her son told me that the man didn't appear to be coherent. He and his brother negotiated with the man for about 15 minutes and says eventually they were able to convince him to leave through the back door. The man came through this gate. Police say he eventually dropped his gun somewhere on this grassy area before trying to escape on a city bus.
We were able to get a description of the male, and we passed that along to local transit. Mississauga Transit notified us, and they had a male on a bus in the area. Officer responded to the bus, and we were able to apprehend the male and arrest him.
Police say the man is 42 years old and from Mississauga. At this point, his motivation is unclear.
Our canine unit also responded and did a track, and we were able to locate a weapon in the area.
It turns out it was only a BB gun. The man has since been charged with mischief over $5,000, possession of a weapon for dangerous purpose, and breach of a probation order. As for the people in the home, they got a pretty good scare, but nobody was hurt. Greg Ross, CBC News, Mississauga.
Public elementary teachers are threatening to strike 2 more days next week. That's on top of their 2 planned strike days happening this week. It's the latest escalation in the battle between the teachers' unions and the Ford government. Our Queen's Park reporter Mike Crawley now with the latest.
Another day, another teachers' strike. This time a province-wide walkout by Ontario's English Catholic Teachers Association, canceling class for more than 500,000 kids.
Honestly, I am not here about compensation. I'm here about the students.
Catholic teacher Randa Robertson is on the picket line today instead of in her classroom.
What we're doing is important, and I'm hoping it makes a difference because our students need us to stand up for them.
Strikes hit various public school boards today too, as the 3 big teachers' unions aim to pressure the government.
We have to look to the future and what's going to happen to the future of education in this province if we don't stand up now and push back against these cuts.
Talks between the province and the Catholic teachers broke down yesterday. Talks involving public elementary teachers collapsed Friday, although the union says a deal was close. And public secondary teachers haven't bargained since mid-December.
President Sam Hammond
already set for rotating strikes in every board this week and a province-wide strike on Thursday. Elementary teachers now warn they'll do the same next week.
The very future foundation of publicly funded education in this province is at stake.
It is very frustrating for parents, and as government, we're looking forward to coming to a deal and working with unions to keep students and teachers in the classroom.
This Ford government minister says she's hearing stories from constituents like this.
You know, I'm a single parent, I'm working a minimum wage job, and now I'm at jeopardy of losing my job because the time that I'm spending at home with my child.
So, contract talks have broken down and no new bargaining dates are scheduled. Every public elementary student faces losing 2 days of school this week and another 2 next week. But the government is not talking about legislating an end to the strikes, at least not yet. It all makes it very hard to foresee just when the daily school routine will get back to normal. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Toronto.
Numbers from the Toronto District School Board show that there are more than a dozen schools that require so many repairs, it would actually cost less just to build an entirely new school. This school in particular is $16.7 million worth of repairs that are backlogged.
Wow, that's crazy.
I'm Talia Ricci, and coming up, we find out what those repairs are and just how big that backlog really is.
It looks like Thursday will be the day hundreds of Canadians stuck in China because of the coronavirus outbreak will be getting on a plane bound for Trenton. The chartered flight arranged by Ottawa is on its way to the city of Wuhan tonight. But as Natalie Collada reports, not everyone may be allowed or want to leave.
It's a kiss Richard Fabich can't wait to feel in person. So when the Toronto dad checked his email this morning, he couldn't believe it.
First, am I dreaming? Because I haven't had much sleep lately. I just had to make sure I read it twice to see that it was what I thought it was.
It was a notice informing him his 15-month-old daughter Chloe and her grandparents have been shortlisted for a flight out of Wuhan, China. But there's no guarantee. Canadian citizens and permanent residents accompanying minors have to pass a health check before boarding the plane. And even then,
right now, there is a larger number of Canadians asking for evacuation than there is space on the plane.
And that doesn't even include most permanent residents.
The health authority so far in China have indicated that it would only let people who carry foreign passports to leave.
The Canadian government will assess if a second plane is needed. In the meantime, Yi Zhang is in limbo. The permanent Canadian resident wants to get back to his life in Toronto, but with the virus still spreading, he's worried about leaving his family behind.
That's probably the most stressful factor.
Nina Ji is also stranded in Wuhan. The Toronto woman's uncle and aunt have been hospitalized because of the coronavirus. She says even if she could leave right now, she wouldn't.
I don't feel comfortable to leave them at this stage, especially when right now there's nothing certain about the disease, when it's going to be totally in control.
To try and control the virus from spreading in Canada, federal health officials will quarantine those on board the plane at a military base in Trenton for 14 days. For Richard Fabich, that means an extra 2 weeks before he's reunited with his baby, but says at least she'll be with her grandparents and closer to home. Natalie Collada, CBC News, Toronto.
Remember, you can find all the latest information on the coronavirus outbreak online at cbcnews.ca, including information on a new presumptive case out in BC. Still ahead, we take you to Hong Kong, where concern is growing after their first coronavirus death. That's coming up for you a little later in the show. Right now, Colin has info on a special weather statement.
Yes, I do, Dwight. And we're talking about a situation with some active weather that's more than well over, in fact, 24 hours out. So there's plenty of time to get prepared or maybe even make some alternate plans. Travel on Thursday is not going to be very good. We are looking at snowfall totals of 5 to 15 centimeters, and I will be narrowing that down so you kind of see where we'll see the heavier amounts. But also some mixing with some ice pellets in the areas you see here in gray. So you see much of it right along the north shores of Lake Erie and Lake Ontario, and certainly taking us through the GTA. A risk of not only ice pellets, but some periods of some freezing rain, maybe even a little bit of freezing drizzle in there too. So that's mostly Thursday, but it'll start overnight Wednesday, and some of it's going to linger, in fact, into Friday as well, especially into Friday morning. So this little system you see here is actually not the one we're going to be dealing with. However, it's on that same track. We've essentially got the jet stream that's just coming in here, our storm track coming right across the lower Great Lakes. So it's pulling all these bits of energy in different storms in our direction, and we're going to see this next one coming from Texas moving through, and that's what's going to have the impact on us. In the meantime, high pressure is actually in place, and that's going to keep things relatively quiet, and not only that, should give us some sunshine through the daytime hours tomorrow, and then it's going to be tomorrow evening when we start to see this late evening and overnight into Thursday, likely starting as some light snow, could be a bit of a mix, but primarily snow into the morning hours, and then Thursday later in the day getting more into this ice pellet perhaps situation in here, and then snow to the north, and then that carries on back into some snow and light snow carrying on even into Friday before it moves all the way away from us. So like I said, I'm going to get into details on where we might see 5 to 10 and where we might see 10 to 15 in terms of snowfall accumulations coming up, Dwight.
Thank you, Colette.
You're welcome.
Peel police are investigating a suspicious death in Mississauga.
When officers arrived, they located an adult male suffering from obvious signs of trauma, and he was pronounced deceased at the scene.
Just when we start walking for the morning exercise, to walk, and we saw it.
Investigators were called to the Eglinton and Winston Churchill area around 2 this morning. Police say there was a fight between two men and one of them fell to the ground. The victim is believed to be in his 20s. Police have not yet provided a description of the other man. A jury in Toronto was shown photos of Tess Ritchie's body today. Ritchie was found dead in a stairwell in the village more than 2 years ago. Kaylin Schlater is now on trial for first-degree murder. Adam Carter has Schlater's reaction to the pictures shown in court today.
Schlater appeared to break down in court Tuesday when he saw pictures of Tess Ritchie's body.
He held a hand to his face and wiped away tears. On a monitor in front of him were photos of Richie at the bottom of an outdoor stairwell. She vanished after a night out in the city's gay village back in 2017. The Crown says Schlater sexually assaulted Richie before strangling her. Crown Bev Richards said in her opening statement that Schlater's DNA was found on Richie's clothes. The photos of Richie's body are graphic. CBC News has chosen not to show them. But the jury saw photos of Richie's face turning blue, lying limp in the stairwell. Court also heard from Riley Simard today. She's a friend of Richie's who was out with her and Schlater that night. Simard testified that both she and Richie were quite intoxicated, but she offered very few concrete details. She told the jury they were asked to leave the bar around 2 a.m. and that she remembers kissing Schlater herself. Adam Carter, CBC News, Toronto.
It is Toque Tuesday in Toronto. The annual campaign to raise money to fight homelessness kicked off this morning.
No one dreams of being homeless, but things happen, and I think as people of Canada, we can see that could have been us.
Mayor John Tory was on hand to sell a few toques at Nathan Phillips Square, where a symbolic castle made out of cardboard signs was displayed. Each toque is stitched with the message, "I give a damn." They are also being sold at TTC stations. The proceeds go to community groups that work directly with those facing homelessness. It's estimated there are more than 5,000 homeless people living in Toronto. Since it began in 1997, the national campaign has raised more than $8 million. It runs until the end of March. There are several schools in the Toronto District School Board that need millions of dollars in repairs. For some schools, the cost is just too high. That money could build an entirely new school. Talia Ritchie now with the numbers.
Toronto's pretty old school. The average age of TDSB's buildings is over 60. Parents may be surprised to learn just how high repair costs are.
The school in particular is $16.7 million worth of repairs that are backlogged.
Wow, that's crazy.
Here are 14 schools where, according to data from the TDSB, the cost of backlogged repairs is so high it would technically cost less to build an entirely new facility.
How sad it is that as a collective we've allowed buildings where children spend their days to get to that point.
Krista Wiley with Fix Our Schools says she's heard it all. Heating problems, leaking roofs, and old bathrooms are some of the most common complaints. Issues this former TDSB trustee remains passionate about.
You look at that data and you see that it's going to cost more to tear to do those repairs than to simply tear the building down and build a new state-of-the-art school. That's when you really have to scratch your head.
It's not as easy to say, for example, this school has so many repairs that it would probably be best that we rebuild it. There are so many different aspects to that, like where do the students go in the meantime?
Charles G. Fraser Junior Public School is one of the schools on that list, and it's more than a century old. The current repair backlog across the TDSB is sitting at around $3.5 billion. The provincial government has committed $1.4 billion to repair schools across Ontario. But the TDSB says it has to spend a lot of the money it does receive on urgent issues.
Make sure that the heat stays on in the winter and that people aren't wearing jackets and being very cold, although sometimes that tends to happen.
Minister of Education Stephen Lecce said last year he launched a program that will invest over $500 million into new schools and renovations.
I could affirm to you that we're going to continue to make capital investments a priority for urban and rural schools.
Wiley says her group wants to see the province double its commitment.
As adults, often give lip service to the fact that our children are our future and that their education is of paramount importance, and yet hundreds of thousands of kids in this province spend their days in buildings that suggest otherwise to them.
Talia Ricci, CBC News, Toronto.
After the break, Van Gogh comes to TO.
The first thing that you immediately see when you walk into the room is this transformation from industrial into really what is organic, because Van Gogh's paintings are sunflowers and clouds.
Details on the new immersive exhibit and the historic building you can see it in coming up next.
The weather update is brought to you by Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand. It's hard to stop a train.
There's a new kind of art exhibit popping up around the world. It's often called immersive digital art, and it's where famous paintings are projected onto massive screens to allow you to feel like you're stepping inside of the art. An immersive Van Gogh exhibit is coming to Toronto. Yellen is here to tell us all about it. Tell us about what we can expect as we immerse ourselves in Van Gogh.
Okay, so you ready for this? Dwight, 600,000 cubic feet of art. We are talking about the building that used to be the former Toronto Star printing presses.
Yes.
This is 1 Yonge Street. And so they are taking over 5 floors. It is really massive and blowing up the works that you see here. For example, the famous sunflowers. You've got the room, the bedroom. There's also a starry night, of course. So these works are really, really going to explode above you, beyond you, around you, below you, all to music. They've actually going to set this to Edith Piaf. I just found this out today. And so what's wild about this, it's all kicking off on May 1st. Now, the key point here is that there was another exhibit that was very similar to this one, but it's actually a competing exhibit. I'm going to give you a look at that one. This one was in Montreal. It kicked off last December. So this is sort of a similar kind of idea, right? But the key difference here is that they're actually going to use the architecture of the Toronto Star's former printing presses So, if there's a column, if the building juts out, then the art changes. They're mapping it to the specific walls as opposed to this one, which was just a bunch of screens. All right, so let's take it away now. I'm going to give you a little bit of this conversation I had earlier with one of the producers, Corey Ross, talking about just that.
The main difference is that this is designed specifically for the location that it's in. So in our case, we're taking over the printing press rooms of the Toronto Star. It is an industrial room that gets video mapped right to the walls and right to the pillars and to the beams and to the floors and the cracks and the idiosyncrasies of the building. You get to see the field of sunflowers, but it starts to move just like it did when he was painting it. So images that you know that are really familiar, that you picture as frozen, is still the way that he did it, come to life.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whenever there are new ways of experiencing art,
yeah,
the traditionalists might criticize it. So the question is, what would Van Gogh say about using his art like this?
Well, that is a great question, because truly, this was a man who was extremely progressive, provocative. He really did things that weren't of his time. This is Van Gogh I'm talking about. But in this exhibit, of course, that's what they're trying to do too, push the envelope. I did ask a similar form of that question to Svetlana Dvoretsky. She's one of the other producers. And, she brought up an interesting example. When the opera houses around the world started showing in movie theaters, she was saying that was actually a huge success, even though that was really criticized too. This is an interesting comparison. Have a listen.
And Metropolitan Opera started to broadcast at the movie theater. It was a lot of criticism, because all of a sudden you take something that very, very, very exclusive and eyebrow, and you're showing it to everybody for $20. As a matter of fact, the opera became much more popular. So I think they should see it before say something, and then we can talk.
So maybe, Van Gogh will be introduced to new audiences, right? The price point here that we're talking about, $40. It's kind of funny because they have a pillow price point, and that is, if you pay a little bit more, you get a pillow, because you can just lie on the floor and have the images all around you. So that's my jam. I'm kind of into it.
The kids will be busy Instagramming. They're not lying down.
That's true. I'll do the lying down.
I agree with her, though.
So this is going to be May that it's kicking off. The tickets go on sale on Friday. And just to mention, that's vangoghexhibit.ca where you can pick those up. And I think this is pretty cool for the city of Toronto. It's going to be there indefinitely. So it's going to be like a new landmark for a time.
Check it out before you criticize. Go and see it first.
There you go.
Thanks, Yelena.
See you soon, Joy.
Still ahead, the results are in. Finally, the Iowa caucuses were plagued with technical issues. So who came out on top? We'll sort of sort it out for you coming up. Plus, Donald Trump will give his third State of the Union address later tonight, just one day before the Senate decides on his impeachment. We'll get you ready for the big speech and the big vote after the break. In the U.S., Democrats in Iowa have finally released some of the results from last night's botched caucus votes in Iowa. Late this afternoon, they said former Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg is in the lead for Iowa's choice for the Democrats as the presidential candidate, with Senator Bernie Sanders close behind. But that result is from only 62% of the state's precincts, and it's not clear when the final tally will be complete. Stephen D'Souza explains.
So, we're back from Iowa.
Instead of waiting in Iowa for the results, candidates moved on to New Hampshire, doing their best to project confidence.
It's a tight three-way race at the top. We know that the three of us will be dividing up most of the delegates coming out of Iowa. I'm feeling good.
But in a sign of the confusion hanging over the race, it's not clear which three Elizabeth Warren was referring to.
First name and last name.
The Iowa caucuses were supposed to bring clarity to a crowded Democratic nomination race, crowning a frontrunner, propelling them with much-needed momentum. Instead, there was chaos. A voting app failed, delaying results. In the vacuum, candidates created their own momentum.
What we saw and what our precinct information revealed, our data throughout the campaign, is that we have the momentum and stepped on that plane victorious on our way to New Hampshire.
Bernie Sanders, who was surging in the polls ahead of Iowa, said he's in pretty good shape.
I don't know how anybody declares victory before you have an official statement as to election results. So we're not declaring victory.
Former Vice President Joe Biden looked to temper expectations.
Everything we can feel is good. Here's the deal. We think we're going to come out of there really doing well, but, be careful what you say because it's not done yet.
In the midst of it all, President Donald Trump made the most of his opponent's fumbles, questioning Democrats' ability to run a caucus, let alone a country. Meanwhile, signs that even this afternoon's results won't be enough to quell the controversy.
I think they ought to get it together and release all of the data.
So they should
That's
wait
what
till
we
they have
need.
it all.
Well, they should get all of the data.
New Hampshire's primary next week uses a tried and true ballot system, so officials there say they shouldn't have any problems. Meanwhile, officials in Nevada, which was set to use the same app as Iowa in a few weeks, say they're coming up with a new plan. Stephen D'Souza, CBC News, Washington.
U.S. President Donald Trump is delivering his third State of the Union address tonight in front of a joint session of Congress. It's a speech that's sure to be remarkable, and not just because this is an election year. Lindsay Duncombe explains why now from Washington.
President of the United States!
Just consider where we are in American politics at this moment. When Donald Trump delivers his State of the Union address tonight, he'll be doing it in the House of Representatives, the same body that impeached him just weeks ago. And that speech will be delivered the night before the Senate is expected to vote and acquit Donald Trump in that same impeachment inquiry. The big question is, will Donald Trump dwell on impeachment? Will he have the same insulting tone that he's had on Twitter and when he approaches news cameras about this? And there are Republicans, people within Donald Trump's own party, who think that the president should stay away from all of that and keep a presidential tone. Here's what they have to say.
My thinking would be, now that we are mostly through this, he's going to win in November of 2020 because of, I think, the arguments that are going to be easy against the Green New Deal, Medicare for all, free college tuition, maybe get rid of the Electoral College, and we've got the hottest economy we've ever had. I would stick on that.
But there's no question that Donald Trump is gloating. He got some positive news today ahead of the 2020 election, including a Gallup poll that has his approval rating at 49%. That's the highest it's ever been on the eve of impeachment. That led to tweets like this from the president. The numbers don't exactly line up, but he says, my approval rating in the Republican Party, 95%. So expect to hear a lot about Donald Trump's accomplishments on the economy, or the economy that Donald Trump will take credit for. He will also talk about the trade deal signed with Canada and the United States. Just last week, he had that ceremony in the Oval Office. And he's going to speak about a blue-collar boom, to really talk about how that economy is benefiting his core supporters. And these are certainly the themes that we can expect to continue to hear as we get closer and closer to that 2020 election. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Washington.
Here at the Jamaican Canadian Association, they're kicking off Black History Month. As you could hear it, they're doing it with a lot of music. They're going to be celebrating Black Canadians and their influence on the music industry. I'll have that story coming up.
So, Colin, I've got to get some yoga in and stretch up for this weather that's coming. There's snow coming, some shoveling on the horizon.
Shoveling, yeah.
Just saying.
Use your knees, Dwight. Use your knees. Yeah, I want to come back to this special weather statement, and just in case you weren't with us earlier in the show, but also just to kind of reiterate here. So we're looking at the areas in gray, and it does include the GTA. City of Toronto is in this. Snowfall amounts of 5 to 15 centimeters. We're probably in the second corridor of that, or quadrant. Well, 10 to 15 centimeters. That's what I'm getting at here. And I'll show you kind of the breakdown of that. Ice pellets mixed in there at times as well. So risk of some freezing rain. So that's why we're likely going to see some poor travel conditions. So this is what I want to get into. This isn't for the whole event, okay? I'm kind of giving you more of a snapshot of what's going to be occurring late on the day on Thursday. So getting into Thursday evening, that's when close to the north shores of Lake Ontario and Lake Erie, we're into more of an ice pellet situation through here, or mixing with the wet snow. And then it's more snow towards the north, more so snowfall, and rain to the south of us. With the tracking of this, it looks like we're going to primarily be in the mix, and then the snowfall. It's more of a snow event, and that's why I'm putting that 10 to 15 centimeters through here, other than very close to the lakeshore. Now back towards southwestern Ontario, there it may be more like 5 to 10, and to the north of us for a change, it may be more like 5 to 10. So we're kind of in the target of where we'll see some of the heavier amounts. Now our current temperatures, this is sort of the calm before this storm gets here. We've got high pressure that's building through, but some colder air moves in tonight, putting us closer to seasonal, which we haven't been accustomed to lately. 1 degree right now in Toronto, Oshawa and Hamilton both sitting right at 0, and then we do have a wind chill. You could kind of feel it in the air today, especially after how mild it was yesterday. So we'll look at how it feels at the moment. A bit of energy to our south, you know, that's actually kind of a different system, but they're almost all tied together just because the jet stream is like our storm track and it's coming right through the lower Great Lakes. So it's going to keep pulling this energy towards us. So that's giving just a little bit of flurry activity towards southwestern Ontario. We actually see a bit of clearing. We get into some sunshine during the day tomorrow in those quieter conditions I was mentioning, albeit a little cooler. But then it's late Wednesday. We'll start as flurries. It should start as flurries, although it doesn't mean at times there won't be a little bit of mix as it comes in. Primarily, though, that happens later, as I said, on Thursday, as I was illustrating there for you. And you can also see here with those pinks coming in. And then that snow carries on, some light snow, it looks like, even into Friday before it tapers off to some flurries. Overnight, a wind chill of -14. Be ready for that tomorrow morning. Be ready for tomorrow afternoon to only go to a high of about -3. And then get ready for Thursday and maybe make some alternate plans because, Dwight, it's just not going to be a good day for traveling. It's a good day for staying inside with some yoga and getting ready for the shoveling.
Oh, thank you, Colette.
You're welcome.
We knew it had to come at some point. Thousands of health workers in Hong Kong are on strike for a second day as officials confirmed the first death in the city from the coronavirus. It is only the second fatality outside mainland China where the death toll has reached 425 and number of confirmed cases is more than 20,000. Many medical workers in Hong Kong have been on strike since yesterday, demanding the border with mainland China be completely closed. Authorities in the city have already shut down all but 2 border crossings. More than a dozen people have been infected with the virus in the city, but as Chris Brown explains, an increase in locally transmitted cases has both health officials and residents worried.
Word of Hong Kong's first death from the coronavirus seemed to add a sense of urgency today at this pharmacy selling protective face masks. We're very worried, said this woman. The government can't control this virus. That's why we feel helpless, why we're looking for masks everywhere. With that worry also comes price gouging. A pack of 50 masks that would normally have cost $8 Canadian sells here for $60. This man told us the anxiety is making people overpay.
I think that's the sentiment in Hong Kong right now. It is festering over the past couple of days.
The man who died in hospital Monday morning had visited Wuhan in China and was just 39 years old, but he had diabetes, which made him higher risk. It's the other new cases of infection that authorities are having a harder time explaining. Most of the people here who become sick have had a direct connection to China's Wuhan area, either by visiting themselves or having a relative who did. But doctors say in 2 new cases and 2 older ones, it's not clear how the patients got sick, calling it an invisible chain of infection.
There's a significant risk of community transmission in Hong Kong. So we have to closely monitor the situation.
In one instance, a Hong Kong clothing store owner got sick, perhaps catching the virus from a customer. Schools and universities have been closed and students urged to stay home and avoid big groups. But clearly, some people are already getting stir-crazy with the restrictions.
We need to go out to have the fresh breath, fresh air.
Up at the landmark Peak Viewpoint, we met teacher Eva Young and a bunch of her teenage students, all of whom said they just had to take a break from their self-imposed quarantine. Chris Brown, CBC News, Hong Kong.
The Toronto Police Service is kicking off Black History Month tonight with a celebration up in North York. Nellie Nanowski joins us live from the Jamaican Canadian Association near 400 and Finch. Sounds like a party up there, Nellie. This year's theme celebrates Black Canadians in music.
It really does, Dwight. It kicked off with a lot of musicians. There was a band here. The Broncos came out. They were drumming really hard. And I'm here right now with one of the masters of ceremony, Farley Flex. He's joining me right now. Thank you so much for taking time to speak with us right now.
Thanks for being here. We really appreciate it.
I want to know, tell me a little bit about what tonight is about and why it's important.
Well, most people should know that this February is the month we celebrate as Black History Month, albeit it's the shortest month. There's a lot of things happening, a lot of events are happening. This in particular is Toronto Police Services with community partners, and we're celebrating this year how music, Black music in particular, has impacted Black history.
Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit about how it's done in the music industry now. I mean, we have a Drake, we have Julie Black, we have all of those people, a long history of music here in Canada. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, you know, now with the advent of the internet and the accessibility to self-promotion and entrepreneurship, it's a slightly different. There's no barrier to entry. There are no A&R reps and so forth now. I've was fortunate enough to manage Maestro Fresh West for 13 years at the beginning of his career, and it was a lot different in terms of how we gained notoriety. But at the end of the day, certain things stay the same. Like touring is still critical. It's also the fastest way to earn like an income. But what's different now is that the trajectory of a song is much shorter now. So you release your song, it has to have impact literally within 24 hours, or else somebody else is going to release theirs and take your spot, kind of thing. So it's while the opportunity is greater, right, the process is much different.
And so tonight, you guys are going to have a few musicians up on stage. Who's going to be taking the stage tonight?
Okay, so first of all, we have the Humber Band, jazz band, and they're going to be doing all the interludes and accompanying certain people. Tiki Mercury Clark, who sang the anthem, will be singing again a song called Wade in the Water, which is a part of a storytelling aspect of things. We've got an 11-year-old named DJ Love Jones. His name is July Jones, and she's performing one of Maestro's biggest song, Let Your Backbone Slide, and full vocal performance. Who else do we have? We have...
I think
that's about it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for taking the time right now. I'll let you get back to your chair. And Dwight, that is just the kickoff today of Black History Month here at the Jamaican Canadian Association in Toronto.
Thank you for that, Natalie. After the break, never before seen video of a deadly CP train derailment. 3 workers were killed. Next, the calls from the victims' families for a criminal investigation into last year's derailment.
Wish there was some other policing organization who could do a criminal investigation on them, because
why do you say that?
I don't trust CP to police itself.
The Federal Court of Appeals says 4 First Nation groups cannot veto the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion project on a claim of inadequate consultation. The appeals court today sided with the federal government greenlighting the project.
What's really important about today is to anybody who says that you can't get major projects built in this country, you can. You can if you roll your sleeves up and you work hard and you do it the right way. And this is an affirmation of that.
Our work is not done. We're going to feel the disappointment today, but that isn't going to define us. and that isn't going to stop us. We're going to continue.
That could mean asking the Supreme Court of Canada to review today's unanimous appeals court decision. It flatly rejected First Nation complaints that Ottawa had effectively pre-approved the project before consultation, noting some conditions were modified as a result of talks. They called Ottawa's consultations reasonable and meaningful and consistent with the reconciliation process. The project aims to triple the capacity of the existing pipeline to move diluted bitumen and other products from Alberta to the BC coast. There are growing calls for a criminal investigation into a deadly CP train derailment on this day last year. 3 crew members were killed when the train derailed on a BC mountainside. Now CBC News has obtained exclusive video of the crash scene. It emerged after last week's Fifth Estate documentary exposed a string of failures at CP Rail. Dave Seglins has the story.
This video shows train 301. Its brakes failed. It was torn apart along the mountain. A high-speed crash involving 112 loaded grain cars. The locomotive landed in a river, shown here covered. The wreck where 3 CP rail workers died.
The Transport Minister, the Minister of Public Safety need to step in.
This professor wrote a book on the Lac-Mégantic tragedy. He says Canada's Transportation Safety Board is investigating the BC case, but it's not its role to look at potential criminal negligence at the railway.
Transportation Safety Board is going to find some answers in a year about the causes, or at least a range of causes, but it's not going to tell the full story. So there really needs to be a criminal investigation in this case.
CBC's Fifth Estate exposed a string of failures with CP Rail's mountain trains, the brakes, maintenance, inspections. Last week, the TSB's lead investigator told us there is enough to suspect there's negligence here, and it needs to be investigated by the proper authority. Well, that landed him in hot water. TSB has demoted him. He's no longer investigator in charge. The TSB saying it was completely inappropriate to voice any opinion implying civil or criminal liability. There's controversy, especially since the crash happened on CP property. CP Rail's own police force says they did an investigation into the actions of the crew. They say it was thorough and resulted in no charges.
I can't put his pictures up yet.
Frustrating for the families of the dead workers who want an independent investigation of the company.
I wish there was some other policing organization who could do a criminal investigation on them, because
Why do you say that?
I don't trust CP to police itself.
CP Rail won't comment on the specifics of the crash as they wait for the TSB's findings expected in a year. However, the RCMP now says they are reviewing this case, talking to the TSB and other federal agencies, considering next steps. Dave Seglin, CBC News, Toronto.
We are tracking a snowstorm over the next day or so. Colette's back with what you need to know after the break. But will it be bad enough that you'll need one of these? Why 2 friends in Newfoundland decided to convert smart cars into snowmobiles. That's coming up next. 1 part car, 1 part snowmobile. Combined, the owners call it the ultimate package. A group of friends in Newfoundland are converting smart cars into winter rides. Our Garrett Barry took one for a drive.
In this job, you go pretty much everywhere, but never in one of these.
Okay, first reactions. Driving on snow is a lot more bumpy than driving on a paved road, but it's also pretty fun.
2 doors, 2 seats, and now 2 tracks. This unique vehicle has a new unique purpose. But how do you get a smart car onto a trail near Indian Bay? We gotta go back a few steps.
This one was the one that we bought first to do that with, and my brother found that one online, and from there, away we went.
From an idea seen on TV to reality in Centerville.
Just to be a little different, I guess, than everybody else, you know. Everybody wants to have something their own.
They were such a hit that now his friends have started following his lead, literally.
I see my buddy Perry with one, brought it down from Alberta somewhere, so I decided to try it, the Bell one.
To make one of these machines is a little bit of work, but once you're inside, it looks pretty familiar.
So if I could drive a normal car, I can drive this.
You want to drive this one?
Say no more.
I just got the thumbs up from someone who passed me. Obviously, this machine turns heads.
Well, we get lots of attention, yeah, wherever we go. We get a lot of attention. People taking pictures and wanting to go for rides.
There's still the issue of what you call these things. Smart doos, ski cars. Even the owners aren't quite sure.
It's just something different, you know, like there's not too many of them around.
But they are almost certain their ranks are going to grow.
And if it's practical, I might bring down half a dozen and do them up and sell them.
His pitch? A fun drive, a trunk to gear up for the cabin, and good for the wife.
Comfortable, like you said, you're in out of the weather, you know, so you don't get her hair messed up with the helmet. And you know, there are women who's now get in the cabin, I got to fix my hair now.
And evidently, not too bad for me. Garrett Barry, CBC News, near Indian Bay.
I love it. I would love to ride one of those, but we won't quite need that for our incoming storm.
Yeah, I think we're going to be okay in
so.
terms of we may not need those kinds of vehicles. But sure enough, we are looking at some accumulations of snow coming in, and most of it will be on Thursday. But as I say, it starts overnight Wednesday, and it will linger into Thursday or Friday morning. Pardon me. But we may see 10, possibly even 15 centimeters here in the GTA, including a mix with some ice pellets at times there. Overnight tonight, we have to get a little more accustomed to temperatures going closer to seasonal, so this still isn't where we should be, but -8 is getting there, and it's going to feel like -14. So chilly overnight tonight and tomorrow morning. High pressure in place. We should get some sunshine during the day tomorrow, and then it's late tomorrow, Dwight, when the system will be coming in.
I feel like we're going to change what seasonal is, or seasonal is changing it for us over the years.
That's a really good point, right?
That's it for us tonight. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Have a great night, everybody. Mike Wise, as you covered, at 11 after the National.